Okay, so what have we used here? Any ideas? What have we used here? Okay, first one we just 3 participants. Okay. So what are we using here? This one is called wrapper class, right? This one is called wrapper class. Now, so we'll do one thing, which is let's system. Right. Now what we are going to do is we're going to create a string. This one equals to c dot next. Right, S1 here. So when we let's complete the program first. Let's let it be till here. Okay, so we are going to compile the program here. Let's set the pause. Okay, so first of all, let's close this program. Now we have another thing. Yeah, so this is our program. So my question to you all is, right now, what if we compile our program? Then what should be the output right now? We compile our program. What should be the output? So firstly, let's run it. Okay, so first output is software one. Now let's enter, for example, 10 as an input. So after we press enter, what will be the output? Any guesses? What will be the output here? Anyone? What will be the output? What should be the output here? After software 1 and 10, after we press enter, what should be the output here? Yeah. So when we press enter, what do we see here? We just have software 2 as the output. That means this program is right now working fine. But what if we enter any string, any characters, right? Not a number. We just enter any alphabet. What we get here? We get here an exception. And what this exception is? Number format exception. So what are these exceptions basically? Okay, so let's take another example of an exception. Is this point clear right now? Why are we getting an exception? Because this wrapper class, it converts string to integer. It converts string to integer, but here when our string is ABC or something like that, this thing cannot be converted to integer, right? It cannot be converted to an integer. That's why what we get here is an exception. Exception is number format exception, right? We are not getting an error. Error we get at compile this program, you'll understand it. But after one more example. So now let's all right. So let's first write few things here. Okay. Now what we are going to write here is, yeah, sum dot count dot println. All right. And we are going to print another thing, which is s. Okay. Let's compile this program now. So let's compile. Right. Now, when we run this program, what should be the output? Any guesses? What should be the output here? Yeah. When we run this program, what should be the output? Come on, answer. No? So first of all, let's run this. Now, so first output that we have here is, the first number is 10. Then it asked us to enter second number, which is, let's enter 5. So now when we press enter, what we'll get? As you can see, we got 2 here and then S2. That means our first output will be S1. Then the second thing that will come as an output will be enter first number. Right. The third thing as an output that we will get is, okay, so then we have to give an input. So we are giving 10 as an input and enter second, then 20 as an input. Now we are giving 5 as an input, right? So now what we are doing here is we are just dividing those two values. We are dividing 10 by 5. So is 10 divisible by 5? Yes, it is. So we are getting 2 as an output. Now at last we are getting S2 as a final output. All right. So this is the flow of our program. Now what if we write 0 here? So what will be the output here? What will be the output this time? So when we divide 0 by 5, what should be the output here?
0.
0.
Okay, 0. It's simple. Okay, the output is 0. So let's first compile and run this and check whether it's correct or not. First number is 10, second number is 5. Right. Okay, now first number is 0, second number is 5. Our output is 0. But what if we just reverse the condition? So we wrote 0 here and not here. So what should be the output this time?
Exception.
What should be? Okay. So let's. So we are having an exception. The exception is arithmetic exception divided by 0. So as you can see, one more thing. Okay, so let's remove this code. Right, so we have written this thing many times. Now let's run it again. So according to this, how many times should we get S2? For example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have written 10 times S2. That means we want S2 to print 10 times on our CMD. So now let's run this program. Okay, so it works fine because we have entered first number as 0 and second as 5. But what if we enter first number is 5 and second number is 0? Now we can see that we have an exception, arithmetic exception divided by 0. And we can see another thing, that all these 10 times that we have printed S2, right? None of them got executed. None of them got printed. So don't you think it's a problem? Right? If somehow our program gets an exception and we are not aware about it, then the other codes, the other line of codes that we have after that exception line, and what will happen to that? All will, none of them will get executed. Isn't it a problem? So from here we can deduce that an exception is an unwanted or unexpected event which occurs during the execution of a program. That means at runtime. And what does this exception do? It disrupts the normal flow of a program, right? So normally what we expected our program to work like, for example, what if we did enter the first number is 10, second number is 5. So what should our normal output be? Okay, wasn't it compiled probably? Let me compile this first. What if that first is 10, then second is 5. So we have 10 times S2, but when we entered first number is 5 and second number is 0, what we got here is arithmetic exception. And after that, all the 10 times that we have printed S2, they didn't even appear here. So this is what an exception is. Now what is an exception? So what is an exception handling? So exception handling is simply, right, exception handling is a way to prevent the exceptions, right, or to handle an exception. It's just, we can understand it from the name, right? So one more point we have is exception don't generate at compile time. You can see that, right? Whenever we try to run the program, then we got an exception. We didn't get it at compile time. So exception generates at runtime. Now, another thing that we are going to understand here is there are basically two types of exception. First one is checked, and the second one is unchecked, right? So what are the difference between these two types of exception? So it means that checked exception are checked at compile time, right? And the unchecked exception are checked at runtime. All right. Now, so these are two basic types of exception. So yeah. Now, to handle an exception, we use five keywords, right? What are they? Try, catch, throw, finally, and throws. Right? These are the five keywords in an exception handling. All right. Any doubt till now? Till here?
No, sir.
All right. Now, so let's erase it all and use the. Now let's understand what is try. So first of all, try is a keyword. Try is a keyword. And now what a try does. So if a programmer, right? If a programmer, uh, he observed that in a program, there is a chance an exception can arise, right? Like there is some programmer, he thinks that no, in this code, I feel like there is an option, like there is a chance that an exception will arise. So to prevent that exception, the programmer writes that code inside a try block, right? Now, how does this try block work? So let's write a simple program for that. Right. Now, we are making just a simple program. Let's check the let's write it next internally and here int x int y. Now what we have to write here is system dot println is divided by y. We have s1 here, we have s2 here, right? Yeah. So this is our code till here, and so what if the first input is 10 and the second input is 5? So what should be the output this time? What should be the final output here? It's easy, right?
2.
2. So before that we have S1 as well, right? So first our output will be S1, then 2, then S2. So let's compile and run this code. So our input should be 10, then 5. Yeah. So what is our output is S1, 2, then S2, right? Now, what if we write it as 0 and 5? So what will be the output this time? What will be the output this time?
S1 0 S2.
S1 0 S2.
Yes, that's right. S1, 0, and S2. So this is correct. Now what if we write it something like this? Now what should be the final output here? What should be the output this time? We saw the case last time as well. So
Exception will
let's.
be there, sir. I guess.
So I guess we should get an exception, right? So let's write it 0. Then we'll write here. So this is the first case. Now we are going to reverse the case here. We're going to write 5 here. Yeah, 5 here, and then 0 here. So what we got S1, then we got an exception, arithmetic exception divided by 0. And as you can notice here, the S2 didn't get print at all. So this can be a problem. Consider if we had 1,000 lines of code and we had an exception in the middle, then what would happen? All that code won't get executed at all and our program will fail completely. So there must be a way to stop this, to prevent this. So here we are going to use try keyword now, right? Try block we are going to use. So I suppose that this line, when we divide it by 0, okay, so you can see before this, yeah. So which line is this? This is line number 12. You can see it from here. This is line number 12. And what we saw here, that divisible by 0 at line number 12. You can see the line number here. That means the programmer can think that, yeah, there is some problem with this line. So let's, and this line is generating an exception. So let's write this code in try block. So, but when we compile and run this right now, what we got? An error. What the error is saying, try without catch, finally, or resource declaration. That means try block cannot be used alone. Try block cannot be used alone. It needs the support of catch block. Right? It needs the support of catch block. So what a catch block is, right? So let's write something here. Try cannot be used alone, right? It needs either a catch or finally or a resource declaration, right? Now about catch block, what does catch does? Okay. So catch block, it will always come after try block. It will always come after try block. So yeah, and another thing is, do you remember when we write if and else, right? So can we write something between if and else block? We cannot write something between if and else block, right? It will give an error. Similarly is with try and catch block. We cannot write any other statement between the try and catch block. So they are supposed to be together. So now what does catch block does? So it does, it handles the, basically handles the exception, right? So let's see it's working here. We have written catch. And okay, so tell me now, which exception did we get here? What was the name of the exception?
Divide by 0.
Yeah, just before that, its name is arithmetic exception. All right, so when we write that, I may get arithmetic exception in this line. All right, what I'm saying, there's a chance that we may. So if this catch block gets executed, then you must print yes, right? So what will happen in this program is, when we'll get an arithmetic exception, the control will go to the catch block, right? It will print whatever it's inside it, and thus our program will return to the normal flow and we'll get S2 as the output. So let's run it and check whether it works or not. So first our input is 10. Okay. First our input is 10. Right. Then we have 5. So what our output is S1, S2, and S1, 2, and S2. So why didn't this line get executed? Because this will get executed only when we have an exception in try block. When we have an exception in try block, then and then only catch block will get executed. All right. So did we have any exception right now in the try block? Can we have an exception right now? Because we have entered 10 and 5. So 10 is divisible by 5, so we won't have any exception. But what if we run it right now and write 0 here, and then we write 5? I guess this will work as well. All right, S1, 0, and S2. But now, what if we write 5 first, then 0? And say. So now what is the output here? First we got S1, then what we were supposed to get? An exception, right? What we were supposed to get? An exception, arithmetic exception divided by 0. But instead that exception got handled by the catch block, and it printed yes instead of the exception, and our program returned to the normal flow, and it displayed S2 as an output. Is that understood till here? Any problem? Any doubt? We'll discuss a few more examples here. Right. So now another exception that we got once. Yeah. Let's write it next only. Okay. Now we are using string s1 equals to s dot next and next, just next, not next, and s2 here. And what we are using here, integer dot percent so what we are doing here, we are trying to convert something to integer, right? So now let's compile and run this program. So it's asking for an input. It will ask for an input. Let's give it as 10. The input we should give it as let's give it 2. Right? So our output is S1, 5, and S2. Now what if we give A, B, C as an input and 5 as another input? What we got here? Number format exception, right? For input string A, B, C. But you can see here, after the input, where are we getting this exception here? On the line number 14. So that means the exception is arising here. Exception is arising here. So let's write this code inside the try block, right? Let's write it inside the try block. Let's write number format exception, because this is what we expected, right? Number format exception. This is what we saw. Out.println, right? And we wrote yes here. So when we run our program here, compile it. Okay, so what's the problem? Okay, yeah. So the problem is we must declare this outside the scope. Int x comma y. Variable might not have been updated. Let's initialize them 0 at first. Now when we have compiled and run this, now it's asking for input. So now when we write A, B, C, okay, so first let's write 10 and then 2. The normal output that we got. Now second time we are writing A, B, C, then 2. So what we got? Exception at the arithmetic exception divided by 0. But you can see that we got 2. We got here yes as an output. How did we get yes as an output? Because we got an exception here and it got handled. That's the reason why we got yes. But okay, so let's run it again. A, B, C, then the second will be 2. Yeah. So what was the exception that we got? Arithmetic exception divisible by 0. We handled it here, but due to some reasons, since we had its previous value set as 0, we got an arithmetic exception here. Right. So let's write this code as well inside the, let's write this whole code inside the catch block. Now there won't be any problem with this. Let's compile and run this. So our first output ABC and then 2. Right. So what's the output here? We got ABC, then 2, then yes, then S2. So ABC and 2 are the input. Then what happened is we got an exception in this line. We got an exception in this line because we entered ABC and it expected an integer here. So what happened then? The control directly skipped all these lines. It skipped all these lines and it went to here, this catch block, and after that it executed S2. So this is the flow of an exception and it is arrived. So is it clear till here? How did we get an exception? How it gets solved? If you have any doubt, please ask me. Any doubts? Even a small doubt will work as well. No? Okay. So let's move to another keyword that's important here. It is finally. So what finally does? Finally is an always executable block. Finally is an always executable block. So what does finally mean? What does it do actually? So suppose we have 10,000 lines of code, right? And due to some problem, what happens is our program stops getting executed, right? Our program stops getting executed. Consider we have opened a connection somewhere, right? We have opened the connection to a file or something like that, to a package or something like that, right? And we get an exception. Then what happened? Then our connection is still open, and what happened is we got an exception. So there is no chances to close a connection. So consider like we have lots of data, right? And to access that data, we have made a connection. We have opened the connection to access the data, right? But in the middle of the program, we got an exception. So when we got an exception, what happened? The program's flow will get stuck. Thus, the connection will stay open. And what this may lead? This may lead to leakage of data. It will lead to leakage of data. So what we need to do is we need to definitely close the connection, right? That we use final block. So final block is always executable block. What happens is final block always executes no matter what exception we have. It always gets executed. So we are going to just use a simple program for finally, right? Use catch here, then we can use finally here. We can use finally even after a try block as well. Let's write this inside this. Won't make much difference in our output. Won't make much difference in our output right now. ABC, then 2. Right. So what we got here? ABC, 2, yes, and S2. So finally block is the always executable block. It gets executed every time, even if we have an exception in our program anyway. Right. So this was enough about finally block. Now yeah, another keyword that we have is here is throws. So what does this throw do? Throws do, right? So if we have any unchecked exception, right? If we have any unchecked exception, right? So throws works like try and catch only, right? And but it gets generated at compile time. So let's understand its use. For example, we are using java.util.star. Let's use java. We have to import another package java.io.star. Right. Now we are using a class here which will just print writer. This is used to create a file. For example, let's create xyz.txt and then let's print something into that file abc. And we must close the file because closing the file is really important so that our data won't get corrupted. Now we write system.out.printf. Right. This one. Okay. Now when we compile this program, what we get here is error unreported exception, file not found exception must be caught, declared or declared to be thrown. That means these exceptions should be caught or should be thrown. So this is where our throw keywords work. You can see that this exception arrived at runtime. That means this can be compile time. That means that can be thrown using this throws keyword. File not found exception. Now let's compile this program and see. And we just ran this program. So this is how we use throws. It just throws any exception which comes at compile time. It is checked at compile time, right? So these were throws keyword. Yeah. So this was the use of throws keyword, and we can see that there is a file which got created in our folder. So this was basically it. We have another keyword, the last keyword, throw. So throw and throws are different, right? Throw and throws are different. What throw does, it is used to create user defined exception. Right? We can create an exception of our own. That's when throw is used. Throw is used when we want to create an user defined exception. Yeah. And throws, what it does, it handles a checked exception. Handles a checked exception, right? So let's see a program for throw as well. Yeah. Let's clear it here. This is the last example for today. Let's create a exception of our own. Invalid age exception. And now in order to let this exception work, we need a class runtime exception. This is the super class of all the exceptions in errors, right? Invalid age exception. We created its constructor. We are creating another constructor of it. String s. Super s. Right. Now let's int age equals to integer dot percent. Let's just put here is 25. So what we are doing is, if age gets less than 18, what should happen is what we want to happen is yeah, we want to throw an exception. We want to throw an exception. Just a minute. Yeah, we want to throw the new. What we did here is we created an object of invalid. See, what you can see here is here invalid age exception is a class, right? What we are doing here is we are creating an object of that class, nothing else. Invalid age exception. We are creating an object of this class, and we are passing a parameter here, ages plus age, right? What we just did here, if the age gets lower than 18, we must get it. We have thrown an exception. That means we have created an exception here. If the age is lower than 18, if not, that's right. Welcome. Right? And if none of them works, we must write another thing. Right. So when we run this case, when we run this case, what we have done is we have created a user-defined exception. We're trying to test it. We run this example. Age is greater than 18, right? So we'll get simple output as welcome and hello. But what if our age is less than 18? What we'll get is, when we compile our program and then run it, what we get an exception in thread main, invalid age exception, age is 2. That means what happened? Our user defined exception. We threw our user defined exception, and it got generated as the age is less than 18. So this is how we use the throw keyword. So how many keywords did we use right now? Try, catch, throw, finally, and close. So this was enough for today. Any doubts? Anyone? What exception? No? Okay, so let's end it. And we